Welcome back to Data Secured. My name is Flobo Boyce, and as always, I am not alone. I'm being joined by some of the luminaries in data and privacy space. Please welcome Shobhit Mehta, who is a security compliance director at Headspace Health, an on-demand mental health company in San Francisco, California. Prior to Headspace Health, he worked for over 11 years in different facets of security and information assurance with HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, PayPal, Fidelity Investments to help build and nurture their security and compliance programs. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Flobo.
Okay, so we were talking about this before we went live. As somebody who's tried half marathons, pretty sad, you actually did not only full marathons, but ultra marathons. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this is something that I discovered when I moved to San Francisco for the first time, that this is a very quintessential thing in San Francisco. If you go to Embarcadero, people are running there all the time. And when I moved here in 2020, I was like, hey, I want to be one of those runners. And fortunately, all the gyms were closed at the time. So I was able to have that time to just run. I started running in 2020, and in 2 years' time, I got better at it. And in 2022, I was like, okay, let's try to do the San Francisco Marathon. I never did marathon, never ran more than 10 kilometers, but on a whim, I registered for the San Francisco Marathon. And I loved the journey of preparation and discipline and making sure that I'm doing everything right. I did the marathon in July, and there was this ultra marathon in November at Mount Tam. Now, I have been to Mount Tam a couple of times, and I knew the elevation, but I was like, this is going to be a good challenge. So let me try to do ultra marathon as well. And I registered for ultra marathon on a whim, and that's on a trail, which is very, very different from running on the roads. So I started preparing for my ultra marathon at Mount Tam. And for those who don't know, marathon is anything over 42.1 kilometers, and ultra marathons is anything above 42.2. So I did my first ultra marathon 50K at Mount Tam last year, and I promised I'm never going to do it again.
You know,
That was that was the first thing that I promised to myself. But trails just call you, man. If you are into trail running, they call you back. I had my first trail run in February of this year, and I got hooked. So I registered for my first 50-mile ultramarathon this year, which is going to be in September.
if you just buy the medals online, you don't even have to run. You just send it to you, and you're a winner in my heart. No, I'm just kidding. You had a very interesting path into the world of security, starting as someone who didn't go into it. What was your story like? How did you get into this space?
I did my bachelor's in 2011, and I graduated with computer science degree. And like many folks who are in computer science in 2011, they all wanted to be a developer. I used to be like a web developer at the time, developed websites for many companies as a freelancer. And I was just sure that my career path is going to be a Java developer. That's what I'm going to do for my entire life. I'm going to learn struts and whatnot. That was my dream at the time. And I got hired by HSBC in 2011, which is a huge bank in the US, and they have a
Yeah.
technology center in India. And we were a batch of 98 freshers who joined at once. And I was the only unfortunate person to be in the information security team. At that time, I never heard about information security. I had no idea what information security is. And for the first 4 years of my career, when I was at HSBC, I created metrics and dashboards and worked on some access management projects. But I realized that's not the career path I want to have for me. And I took a switch. I started working more on banking compliance. I worked with Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse to just work on banking compliance and Basel regulations and Sarbanes-Oxley and whatnot. I did that for 2 years, but then I realized this is more boring than what I did at HSBC. And at that time, I already gave my GRE and TOEFL to expand my horizons and come to the US. And I was looking at different universities for computer science. And one of my friends suggested, why don't you try cybersecurity so you can actually collaborate, or you can actually have all your experience of 4 years at HSBC being utilized when you move to the US. And I thought that would be a good move. I don't have to start from scratch. So I applied at Northeastern, got accepted, and the next 2 years actually changed the horizon of my life and career. I was very fortunate to work with PayPal as a risk management intern. I worked with Fidelity Investments for an entire year as a technology risk management, and then I got hired by Ginger at the time in January 2020 as the senior security compliance analyst. And I was the first security hire. So I started doing all these different things that are in security realm. And that was the my initiation into security and learning more about security. And I think the last 3 years and 2 quarters have been the most uh, enriching years of my life, both personally and professionally.
Oh wow, that's pretty good to hear. It means
Yeah.
you're on the right path, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about industry trends. I mean, the whole world has been losing their collective wit about AI and the rise of AI, Chat GPT, Google Bard, and the likes of those. As the intersection of security and AI seem to be converging, where do you see AI currently being used, and where do you want to be seeing used in the future in industry?
Yeah, Flobo, if you look at throughout history, there have always been inventions, but on their own, they did not make a lot of impact. So, for example, if you just invented wheels, but if you don't have a vehicle for that, it doesn't serve a lot of purpose. If you have internet, but you don't have email, it may not serve a lot of purpose and it may not reach to the wider population it has reached in the past 2.5 decades. Similarly, for AI, I think the main component is going to be the intersection where AI will intersect with many different domains in the security and privacy realm. I think
Mhm.
one thing that I'm really curious about is how will shape AI for DevSecOps. That's one thing that I'm passionate about to make sure that we have security controls in our pipeline and whatnot. And right now we have this all different static analysis and dynamic analysis tools. And I just think, what if we can have all that code hooked into OpenAI, and then OpenAI will do a scan and say, hey, you have this business logic error, which static analysis tools don't really catch. Or, hey, if you're collecting this information that you don't need, which is like you're collecting the knowledge of OpenAI LLM for enriching your privacy practices. So that's something that I'm really excited about. At Headspace Health, we always try to kind of be on the forefront of all these different technologies. And one of the main things that we try to do is to really data classify the data and label the data to the best of our abilities. And tools such as Dasera, we are trying to do this on an automated fashion, really help us a lot to achieve that mission in a much faster manner than we would on our own.
Well, as AI becomes a stronger companion to cybersecurity, do you foresee any privacy complications that anyone should be aware of?
Well, there, of course, there will be privacy complications, Flobo. For example, in all this large learning models, there's always this dichotomy between people who own the data and then who use the data. For example, OpenAI uses all these different LLMs to provide the responses to ChatGPT, but they don't necessarily own all the data, and we don't necessarily have those moral and ethical guidelines right now to determine how we'll compensate people who own the data. Uh, Similarly, for if you saw the recent hearing from Sam Altman on the Senate, he had the same thoughts that we have to have some regulations around open AI and privacy on how we merge this together, so we don't really uh, cross paths with unrequired or unwanted consequences. We always are prepared to do the best we can, and that's something that we have to wait and watch. That what's going to happen in the next. Perhaps I would say 3 to 5 years, but I think that's going to be too long. So I would say 6 to 12 months. That's the time frame I'm looking at.
Right. Life comes at you fast, and even faster, it seems. Before we started talking, we were talking about the relationship between the focus of privacy left and privacy right, instead of centering attention around security only when it comes to businesses and their vision. For those in our audience who are unaware of shifting left to right, can you give a brief definition of what you mean by that?
Yeah, let's start with shifting security left and shifting security right. I think that's been the focus of industry for the last year, where we focused a lot on shifting security left. We want to have SAST, we want to have SCA, we want to have our penetration testings done and then DAST done and whatnot. So we have a lot of this focus on shifting security left on the security side. And I had this talk at B sides this year where I really emphasized on having the focus of privacy being shift on left and right. And what I mean by that is we have to, this really starts not when you collect the data. That's not where the privacy starts. Privacy really starts when you start thinking about the feature as a whole. It should be a forethought of building any feature and not the afterthought. And I can give you an example. The moment you are starting to create a PRD, product requirement document, for any feature or any uh, system that you want to develop, you should start thinking about the data that you'll be collecting from members, and then how you would minimize the data collection that you will from your members, to ensure that you are making sure you are not collecting data that you don't need. So that's something that we are very passionate about at Headspace Health. One of my favorite values at Headspace Health is putting members first, and we don't want to collect any data that is not required to provide the services to our members. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, to shift privacy left, be it reviewing the PRDs and identifying all the PIIs that we'll be collecting, and then making sure that we reduce that as much as possible, making sure that when we collect that PII, we are using only that uh, for the purpose that we promised our members. That's the foundation of trust. That's the key, that we only use the data for the purposes of supporting our members. And then lastly, when you collect this data from your members, how you would protect the data is at the governance level. So
Mhm.
you have all this data lying in your databases. You want to make sure that you have enough rules and controls in place, so that you are not using that for unrequired purposes, and only people who should have the access to data, they have access to data. Yeah.
There's a lot of priorities, a lot of issues on businesses' plate they have to juggle with these days. Sometimes privacy could be more or less an afterthought. I mean, how can privacy professionals help businesses and business stakeholders to understand the importance of privacy?
Yeah, there are number of companies which are hyper growth companies, Flobo.
Mhm.
Headspace Health, we always want to have new features for our members. We want to operationalize the features that we developed and so forth. However, I think the most important part is to have product engineering, legal, and privacy teams as your partners. If you don't have these four partners with the security, it's just not going to work out. Product team will have always have some priorities where they would want to have a new feature for the members. Engineering team will follow the product team, where they would lean on product team to give them guidance on what really needs to be built, and then they will build that feature. But if these two teams are working in silo and we are not talking to them, it's going to be a very hard battle to protect the data that we want to protect for our members, and it's going to be difficult. So I think it's a culmination of all these five teams together. If we just say, okay, we have the sponsorship from security team, it's not going to work out. We have to have a sponsorship from product engineering, privacy, legal, and security to develop the privacy framework for anything that we do.
Sure, but riddle me this there. How could we have that focus, maintain that focus, but ensure privacy and security requirements don't get in the way of business outcomes?
Uh, Well, this is again going back to the previous response. I think that privacy is not something as an add-on to this default feature development flow. I think
Mhm.
it's part of the development as a whole. And a very good example is Apple. They are one of the best companies in the world who are doing a lot of different things. And if you think, they always keep privacy of members at the forefront of everything that we do. Now, you cannot say that they are not working on creative features or they're not fulfilling their business purposes. They are doing all of that with privacy being the focus of their work. Another example is Garmin, which collected a lot of data from members for they're into athletic watches and heart monitors and whatnot, and they are really good at keeping privacy at the forefront of everything that we're doing. So I think those are some of the key things that we need to keep in mind, that privacy is not separate from development as a whole. It's a part of the development. It's an ingrained part of development, just as writing a PRD or writing a tech spec, you have to be mindful about the privacy. And it's, again, not an afterthought, but it's an ingrained component of the entire SDLC.
So you're saying it can be done, right?
It can be done, and yeah, you just need the right tools, right sponsorships, and it can be done. Yeah.
Well, with the fields of security, privacy, and more, what would be a good resource to recommend for someone just starting out in that field?
Well, I would recommend my own blog. When I started my career, or when I moved to the US, I started learning more and more about security. And at that time, there weren't many resources which could really distinguish between the nitty-gritties of security and compliance and privacy and governance and risk management. All those things seem to be one thing, but they are not. So for anybody who's just starting their career, I would just recommend my blog, which is grcmusings.com, my random musings on GRC, privacy, and whatnot. Another resource that I would recommend is to go my book. I recently wrote a book on CRISC, which is certification by ISACA. But the first chapter is something that I really wanted to have in the book, that how GRC professionals should look at security from the lens of GRC. So that's like the primer of the entire book, that you have chapter 1, a primer on GRC, where I go into detail about how different teams should work together and what's governance, risk compliance, and then chapter 17, which is how security and privacy teams should work together. So those are two things which are really, really relevant to this conversation.
You literally wrote the book on it. Wow, that's amazing, man. Gotta give you props for that. Here on Data Security, we ask all our guests this question, so gotta make sure that I gave you the quick primer here. But if you had a magic wand that could change anything that you would like about data privacy, security, and governance, what would you do and why?
Well, I would ask for more budget.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah,
And why?
there are always this amazing tools that are in the market, Flobo. For example, Dasera, they do an amazing job of data governance. They have this features to build a specific rules where you can fine grain the access control based on the departments, not even rules. And all of that is automated via Okta. And there are a bunch of other functionalities that I would love to have. There are other tools as well that I would love to have implemented at Headspace Health. There are always some new trainings that I would want me, for myself, or my team to do. And it's just that you're always restricted by either budget or time. So that thing, if I can have enough budget and time, I think that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, I know I said magic wand, but I don't think that exists. A more budget wand. That sounds impossible. But thank you so much for being on the show, Data Secure. Now, if someone wanted to connect with you or even see some of your resources, how'd they go about doing that?
Yeah, they can just go on LinkedIn and search for Shobhit Mehta Headspace, or probably search on Google for Shobhit Mehta GRC. And they should either be redirected to my LinkedIn page or personal blog. Yep.
Well, man, thanks for the show. We want to have you back in a future episode to talk more about this burgeoning sector and industry.